Let's talk about baseball. Baseball, at its core, is a sport that's built on failure and slim margins. Just think about it. That little white ball is humming at you at speeds between 70 and 100 miles per hour. Hitting that little white ball is one of the most difficult things to do in sports. You put that ball in play and reach base 3 out of 10 times, you're considered really good. You do that over the course of 100 plus games, you're considered one of the greatest. The sport quantifies these failures. Every strikeout, every error, every runner left on base, every pitch that missed the strike zone. It preserves all of it permanently in a box score. And that, to me, is why it works so naturally in metaphors about what it means to grow up. Because adolescence keeps its own box score. Every missed social cue, every humiliation, every moment where you took a swing at something and missed, or stood frozen while a seemingly perfect opportunity sailed right past you. All of it accumulates in a private box score that feels, at that age, not just permanent, but defining. The structure of baseball mirrors the structure of youth with an uncomfortable level of precision. And it's not just the batter standing alone at the plate, it's the pitcher too. Here's a sport where the act of beginning something, of being the one who sets everything in motion, is also an act of exposure. The mound is just as lonely as the batter's box. They stand, by themselves, 60 feet away from the problem, and essentially throw themselves directly at it. Every pitch is a decision, and every decision has the potential to be punished. And then there's the field, the quiet, almost terrifying field, where most of the game is actually spent doing nothing, waiting, watching, and then, without warning, the ball is hit your way. Everything that follows is a chain of split-second decisions that have to be executed perfectly in sequence. Do you charge it, or do you hold? Do you throw to second, or throw to first? Do you cut the ball off, or do you let it go? The wrong angle, the bobbled transfer, or the throw that sails wide, these are the moments that lose games. They are also the moments that define careers, and they happen in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Most of adolescence is that same kind of waiting, and, just like a fastball, it does not negotiate. When the ball finally finds you, when it demands that you act and act now, the weight of every possible error collapses onto a single second. Enter FLCL and Sonny Boy, two surrealist, avant-garde anime. One of them, a classic from the early 2000s, raw and frenetic and unlike anything that came before it. The other, a niche standout from the post-pandemic era. It's the kind of show that rewards the people patient enough to accept its strangeness and leaves you with more questions than answers. On the surface, these two shows seem very different. Different decades, different paces, different emotional high points. And neither of these anime are about baseball in any traditional sense. However, both shows have a titular episode, ironically, both sitting at the 4th episode, in which their central themes and messages are revealed through the vehicle of a baseball game. A bat, a pitcher, a field, and a ball moving through the air at impossible speed towards someone who has to decide, right now, what they're going to do about it. Both of them use the game as a means to explore personal agency, the agony of adolescence, and the quiet, suffocating weight of what society expects from the people whose minds have not yet finished shaping. The conclusions they arrive at are not necessarily the same, but I would argue they are two halves of a larger conversation, two parts of a whole that neither show could have expressed alone. FLCL Episode 4 sees baseball as a moment of catharsis and emotional growth during a time that is confusing for most preteens. It suggests that the swing is everything, that the terrifying, committed, and irreversible act of choosing to engage is what separates a life lived from a life deferred. Sonny Boy Episode 4 views the game of baseball as a commentary on the institutions and systems that young adults struggle to live in. It also suggests that deciding to swing is just as dangerous. The search for your identity can be a trap, and that adolescent individuality is under constant threat to be taken over by the group. So, let's step up to the plate and take a crack at examining these two shows. Don't touch that dial. It's time for part 1 of The Language Beneath the Language, right here on YGN Yugen Radio. Surrealism is described as an artistic style that focuses on the hidden, illogical, and dreamlike aspects of the mind. It's a style that attempts to express specific ideas or provide visuals of things that go beyond what is logically possible in everyday life. It's confusing, but it's also mesmerizing. It's where dreams and the subconscious come to life. To understand why these two shows use baseball the way they do, you first have to understand the world they're operating in. because neither Fooly Cooly nor Sonny Boy are realistic in their presentation. They are not interested in showing you adolescence the way anything in live action would, where things are clean, observable, and explained. They are interested in showing you what adolescence feels like from the inside. And from the inside, adolescence is not clean, it's not observable, and it does not explain itself. It is surreal. Think about your late childhood for a moment. Your body changes without your permission, emotions arrive with a force that seems starkly different to whatever triggered them. The social world shifts constantly. Connections form and collapse overnight, the rules keep changing, and no one will ever tell you what the rules actually are. The adults around you are supposed to be guides, but many of them seem just as lost as you are, and the others are too busy pretending that they aren't. Realism, as a way of storytelling, was never going to be enough. You need something stranger, something that can take the chaos that lives inside a 12-year-old's chest and make it tangible, hitting you in the gut the way it hits them. That is what surrealism does. It takes the things that are happening beneath the surface and it makes them literal. Both of these shows understand this completely, even as they execute it in almost opposite ways. Fooly Cooly is loud.
He's dead! This young boy is completely dead, just as Taro would be!
But he's not Taro, like I said.
It is overwhelming and relentless in a way that mirrors the sensory overload of early adolescence. It's a chaotic coming-of-age story that follows Naota, who lives in the boring city of Mabase with his father, grandfather, and very questionable older girlfriend Mamimi. We find Naota in the midst of dealing with the absence of his older brother Tasuku, who has left Japan to play minor league baseball in America. His monotonous days of floating through life and getting uncomfortably teased or assaulted by Mamimi are shaken up when a crazy woman on a Vespa scooter clocks him in the forehead. That crazy woman is Haruko Harahara, and, unbeknownst to Naota, has opened up an interdimensional portal on his forehead to awaken an evil god that threatens to destroy the world. What follows is the physical and emotional manipulation of Naota by Haruko, and Naota's journey to become his own man. The word man is emphasized here, because that is a main point of contention with Naota throughout the show's 6-episode runtime. Throughout the show, Naota battles with the world around him becoming distorted, as the pressures of masculinity, parental neglect, and his own passivity take a toll on him. The strange beings that manifest themselves in each episode are always tied to the fluctuation of emotions that Naota feels, but is unable to express in a healthy way. A robot erupts from Naota's skull without warning, that same robot gains sentience and becomes Naota's stand-in sibling. A government agent wears big-ass eyebrows to protect himself from dimensional power. None of this is clearly explained, and none of it needs to be, because if you were ever 12 years old and suddenly became aware of your own body and emotions, then you already know exactly what that chaos feels like. Fooly Cooly is not depicting puberty, it is puberty, rendered in shifting animation styles, scored by the pillows, and fired at you at full volume. Where Fooly Cooly shouts, Sonny Boy whispers.
This is a completely different place than where we're from.
What do you mean?
That somehow we've entered into a strange new world. It's some kind of other this world, just like when the school was covered in darkness.
Its surrealism is deadpan. It presents the impossible as ordinary. It's an anime that is just as existentialist as it is surrealist. It is a Lord of the Flies type story that follows a high school class of 36 students suddenly getting transported to a void dimension. As the students attempt to make heads or tails of their surroundings, they come to the realization that many of them have been blessed, or cursed, with supernatural powers. The students try to find a way to govern and protect themselves as they are whisked away from dimension to dimension, encountering various phenomena and searching for a way back home. In this anime, we follow Nagara, the introverted and detached student of Moria High School. Nagara begins the series as a passive, introspective, and emotionally distant teenager. He's not rebellious, but he isn't compliant either. Instead, he presents a kind of quiet detachment from both authority and his peers. From the moment he is cast into the void, his response is not resistance or panic, but passive acceptance. Other characters, ones that we'll examine later in this episode, scramble for a purpose and a sense of normalcy. However, Nagara simply observes. He doesn't reject the absurdity of the situation. And, in his mind, this will allow him to remain untouched by consequence. This show, as if to place us in the mind of Nagara, looks you in the eye and tells you the most extraordinary things in the flattest possible voice. Somehow, that restraint makes the show more unsettling, because the horror here is not the strangeness of the world. The horror is in the stasis. The students in Sonny Boy are trapped, not just physically, but temporally. They do not age, they don't change, They could drift through this void for 1,000 years and emerge exactly as they entered. Still teenagers, still unfinished, still suspended in the purgatory of being almost, but not yet. The thing about this premise that cuts so deep is that being a teenager already kind of feels like that. It already feels like being stuck in a dimension that doesn't follow the rules, where time moves wrong, your body isn't fully yours yet, and every attempt to understand the system reveals only that the system was not built for you. This is a slightly older kind of adolescent thinking. It's the kind that has moved past the raw chaos of early puberty and arrived somewhere different, but just as daunting, where the questions are bigger and the answers are harder to reach. Sonny Boy's surrealism is also philosophical. It asks you to sit with a random but not so random story about a talking dog for 20 minutes and trust that somewhere inside that strangeness, something is being said about power, identity, and the downsides of hierarchical systems. But here is what both Fooly Cooly and Sonny Boy share. Neither of these shows use the surreal elements as decoration. They aren't atmosphere. They're stylish, but not just for the sake of style. The surrealism is the story. Now, let's talk a little bit deeper about the boys at the center of these stories. Because neither Fooly Cooly nor Sonny Boy gives you a traditional protagonist. You're not going to get a hero here. You aren't going to get someone who rises to the occasion with confidence, who looks at the chaos around them and feels called by it. What you get instead are boys who would rather not. Boys who have looked at the world being offered to them and have decided, consciously or otherwise, that they want no part of it. This is not a coincidence. This is the whole point. Naota and Nagara, two quiet, inward, and passive boys dropped into situations that demand the opposite. Two protagonists defined not by what they do, but by what they resist doing. And in both cases, the story is built around a single essential question that has nothing to do with plot and everything to do with identity. The question is not, can he win, but will he engage? Will he allow himself to be a person with all the vulnerability and exposure that entails? Or will he find a way to stay on the proverbial sidelines, watching the game without ever stepping onto the field? Let's start with Naota, 12 years old, living in the strange, smoke-covered town of Mabase. Naota is a boy performing adulthood in a town of adults performing childhood, and the performance is exhausting to watch. Naota is not indifferent. He is terrified of what happens if he stops pretending to be. The line he keeps returning to, "Nothing amazing ever happens here," is not an observation. It's a defense mechanism. It's the thing that he tells himself so that when something amazing does happen, he has a reason not to respond to it, and not to be changed by it. His older brother Tatsuku is a character who never makes an appearance, but haunts the narrative throughout this anime's 6-episode runtime. Tatsuku, who left for America to play professional baseball, is the pinnacle of everything Naota is expected to become. A capable, confident, fully formed man, already out in the world doing the thing that men in stories do. The bat that Naota carries throughout the series is Tatsuku's. It was handed to him when his brother left, along with everything else his brother left behind, including the expectation that Naota would simply step into the outline that Tatsuku left behind. He's 12 years old and he's already living inside someone else's identity, already being asked to be the next version of a person he never chose to be. This is what Naota represents at his core. He represents the adolescent who has made a very deliberate, very understandable decision not to decide. He's chosen cynicism as a shelter. He wears emotional flatness as an armor. Because if you never admit that you want something, you can never be let down by not getting it. To bring it into the context of baseball, if you never swing, you can never strike out, which we know not to be true at all. The thing that makes Naota so relatable is that the bat is right there in his hands, and he knows exactly what it's for, but he's determined not to swing it. Not yet, at least.
Nothing amazing happens here. Everything is ordinary. So it's not a punishment like when I go see Samajima Mamimi. It's just something I always do. It's ordinary.
Nagara is a different kind of still. Where Naota's passivity is a performance, Nagara's withdrawal is quieter and more considered. He's not pretending to be indifferent. He is genuinely uncertain about whether engagement is worth the cost. He has looked at the social world forming around him in this strange void. The power grabs, the hierarchies assembling themselves, the way that other students invent systems of control in a dimension with no rules, and has arrived at a conclusion that is kind of hard to argue with. That participating in these structures might cost more than it returns. That the game might not be worth playing. Not because he's afraid of losing, but because he has looked at what winning seems to require and decided not to participate. He was also given a power when he entered the void. An extraordinary, uncontrollable power that he never asked for. the ability to move between the endless possible dimensions in the void. He didn't choose this. It erupted in him the same way everything erupts in adolescence. He cannot control it, nor can he fully understand it. The crux of Nagara's story, something that we will touch on later in this episode, is two things. First, Nagara's denial of participating in life is not a defiance, but a deliberate erasure of self. He has no answer for what he actually wants, not because he lacks desires, but because admitting them would force him to exist as a person who can be hurt. Second, and most important, everyone around him has already decided what his purpose is. They've built expectations around it, and have already started treating him as a solution to a problem he never agreed to solve in the first place. This is the metaphor of being a teenager who has enormous potential within themselves, but cannot direct it yet. There is something in there. Other people think they know what it is before you do, which is somehow worse, because their certainty about what you are capable of arrives before you have any certainty of yourself. Suddenly, you are carrying not just your own confusion, but the full weight of others' expectations. From his point of view, Nagara's power is not a gift. It is a burden that has been assigned to him by circumstances, and the question his entire arc is built around is whether he can develop a self strong enough to wield it rather than to be wielded by it. These two boys' character arcs are parallel in a way that is crucial to understanding what both shows are actually arguing. Both Naota and Nagara are presented to us as pre-swing. Naota is not yet committed to a single authentic action. He is standing at the plate, watching pitch after pitch go by, telling himself he's being strategic when he's really just being scared. Everything inside him is wound up tight. The strange things that are happening in the city of Mabase is not his doing. They are happening to him, as puberty happens to people. For Nagara, he has consistently avoided playing the game entirely, but now, things are different. He has stepped into the batter's box against his will, in the sense that his powers are already active, affecting everyone around him and pulling him into a position he can't opt out of. His struggle is both when to act and how to act with a sense of self that is his own, rather than borrowed from the expectations of the people watching him. And so together, these two boys do something remarkable. They bracket the full problem of adolescent self-determination. Naota shows you the paralysis that comes before commitment. Nagara shows you the chaos that comes when commitment arrives before understanding.
So why'd you run? Did you hear me? I asked why you ran away.
Well, I couldn't reason with him. I had no choice.
What does that mean?
Me leaving is what they all wanted, so I did.
Now, let's talk about Fully Cooley Episode 4, Full Swing. The episode opens up on a game already in progress. The Mabase Martians, a local team that is aging and clearly outmatched, is currently losing. Haruko is playing for the opposing side. This is something the episode wants you to notice, that Haruko is playing against Naota. She's not on his team, and she never really was, and she's very, very good at baseball. The Martians are coached by Naota's grandfather, who is incensed by their 44-0 defeat, failing to score a single run before the 5th inning mercy rule was enacted. Everyone on the Mabase team looks to Naota to come in and turn the tide of the game, assuming that the brother of Tatsuku, their former star player, must be good enough to help them win. Naota's first 3 at-bats ended with him striking out looking, on 9 pitches total, having refused to swing the bat at all. During his 4th turn at bat, Haruko simply throws a fastball at his face. To make matters worse, Kanti, the robot that appeared out of Naota's head in episode 1, suddenly shows a tremendous skill for baseball. Naota's grandfather and the rest of the Mabase Martians decide that Kanti will be the one to help them beat Haruko. This sequence paints a clear picture of Naota's indifference and hesitation, at the plate by himself, holding a bat that doesn't belong to him. I know I keep mentioning it, but it's important that we talk about this bat. Naota's been carrying Tatsuku's bat for most of the series. It's not his own. And I know I keep bringing this up, but the distinction matters enormously, because in Fully Cooley, objects are never just objects. A bat that belongs to someone else represents a self that belongs to something else. Naota inherited this bat the way he inherited Tatsuku's position in the family, Tatsuku's role on the team, and Tatsuku's fabricated relationship with Mamimi. All of it against his will. He is 12 years old and he's already living inside a hand-me-down life, and the bat is the most visible symbol of everything he has not yet claimed as his own. Later in the episode, Haruko says it to him directly, in the blunt and slightly cruel way that Haruko says everything to Naota.
Anyway, nothing can happen till you swing the bat.
This line lands differently depending on where you are in your life when you first hear it. To a child, it sounds like advice about baseball. To an adult, it sounds like the summary of everything Fully Cooley's been trying to tell you since the first episode. Nothing can happen until you swing the bat. Not until the conditions are perfect, not until you fully process your grief, not until you fully feel ready, because you will never fully feel ready until you swing. The act precedes the understanding. The commitment precedes the clarity. That is the order of operations here. This is what the episode is really about. It's an episode about jealousy, about anger. It's about the ugly, embarrassing, completely human emotions that Naoto has been suppressing under a performance of indifference. He is jealous of Haruko's attention going towards his father. He's angry at his brother for leaving. He is furious about being 12 in a world in which he feels like he needs to act 18. And all of that is folded into the symbolism of swinging the bat. Will he actually swing it with everything he has? With all the feelings and emotions he has been refusing to admit that he has? The episode builds towards its answer through escalating absurdity that is also, somehow, escalating emotional truth. A satellite shaped like a baseball is falling from the sky towards the town of Mabase. Haruko takes Naoto up to the top of the medical mechanica plant and pulls out a different kind of bat from his forehead, a Gibson guitar. Naoto looks around for help from Haruko, and she's nowhere to be found. She abandons him for her own selfish reasons. She looked at this frozen, frightened boy and decided to force his hand. She had been pushing him towards this moment for the entire series. Although her motives are more evil on the surface, her leaving Naoto to make a decision for himself serves as a positive metaphor, if you can believe it. Because in real life, the people who challenge us to grow don't always stay to watch. Sometimes they leave right before the moment they were supposedly preparing you for. And then it's just you and the choice. Naoto makes the choice to swing. He calls on his brother's strength as he makes contact. This is important because it's not a portrayal of the theme, but a key complication of it. He doesn't arrive at this moment having fully shed his brother's shadow. He arrives at it imperfectly, reaching for the nearest source of power available to him. He manages to halt the satellite, pouring out all his strength in his attempt to save the city. Haruko eventually comes in to help, and they drive the satellite back into space. This is a significant point of Fooly Cooly delivered in a single image. The swing does not require perfection. It does not require you to have first resolved every mental conflict and arrive at the plate as a fully realized human being. It only requires that you swing, because you never know what might happen. The bat connects, and however imperfect that connection may be, you become, for the first time, the subject of your own story rather than a footnote in someone else's. In the aftermath, Mamimi watches from the riverbank. Her reaction is not joy, nor is it celebration. It's grief. Mamimi is one of the more interesting and important characters in Fooly Cooly, especially when it comes to Naoto's growth. Tatsuku's leaving left a void in her life too. And much like how the people in Mabase had an expectation of Naoto to become another version of Tatsuku, she deluded herself into forcing Naoto to become a surrogate boyfriend in place of Tatsuku, going as far as to only refer to Naoto as Takun, a shortened version of Tatsuku's name. This new version of Naoto scares her, because she needed Naoto to be passive. She needed him to be the presence that she could shape into whatever she needed. The moment Naoto swings and acts as himself rather than Tatsuku's placeholder, he ceases to be what she needed him to be. This is the thing that stories about growing up so often leave out. They show you the liberation, and they skip the period of grief that the liberation leaves in his wake. The camera holds on Mamimi's face long enough for you to understand that growth is not free, nor is it easy. Becoming yourself always costs something, and the cost is not always paid by you. The swing, though it may be needed and long overdue, always lands on someone. So, Naoto stands there in the aftermath. He has swung, he has connected, he hasn't become a grown-up, but something's different now. The question that the rest of Fooly Cooly, and by extension the rest of adolescence, will spend its time answering is this. Now that you've allowed yourself to be real and present and in the game, what comes next? Sonny Boy might have an answer.
Then came the golden age of the M-League. A miracle monkey came along and surpassed the previous greats one by one. Monkey Blue. This maverick was the only one with blue hair, who despite facing cruel discrimination and persecution, triumphed over his peers with devastating talent, ultimately becoming a hero and a symbol of hope for the monkeys. Still a rookie.
Let's talk about episode 4, The Great Monkey Baseball. For a kid who just wants to be left alone, Nagara has an unusual amount of things demanding his attention. His power keeps activating without his permission, world hopping the entire group in and out of dimensions without warning or destination. Mizuho has appointed herself the unwanted manager of his personal life, pushing him toward Nozomi with the subtlety of someone who has decided Nagara's emotional paralysis is a problem only she can solve. There's also Asakaze, who has feelings for Nozomi, and has decided that Nagara is the reason things are complicated right now, and is carrying a grudge that the show is in no hurry to resolve. Into all of this, Cap wants to play baseball. Over dinner one night, Cap asks Nagara to practice with him. Ace, the group's best player, has refused. The four of them are out on the field the next day. Nagara pitches while Nozomi bats, and Cap and Mizuho watch from the sideline. It's a quiet, almost mundane scene that has come to be Sonny Boy's entire vibe. kids playing baseball on a strange island in a dimension that isn't theirs, because what else are you going to do? Nozomi gets a hit, a particularly good one too. Cap, entirely unsurprised, explains that Nozomi has just broken a record set by a Monkey League player named Steroid Monkey. The others, and probably you as the viewer, stare at him confused. Cap proceeds to spend a significant portion of the episode explaining what the Monkey League is, and that these monkeys play baseball on the very field that they are standing on. There's a catch, however. The monkeys cannot be seen with the naked human eye. Observing them requires a device called the Monkey Getter, a kind of lens that makes their world visible. There's only one Monkey Getter on the island, and it belongs to Ace. His friend has no interest in lending it to Mizuo and the others, so Ace proposes a challenge. He will pitch to Nagara's friends. If anyone in Nagara's group can get a clean hit off him, he will loan them the Monkey Getter. If they all strike out, Nagara has to use his power to take everyone home, immediately. This is where the episode tightens into something more complicated, because the challenge rests on an assumption that nobody has thought to question out loud. The assumption that Nagara can actually control where he takes people. At the top of the episode, his power activates accidentally and briefly transports the group to a baseball field. That field looked, just for a moment, like home. The students conclude that Nagara can reach home and that it's simply a matter of him choosing to do it. Nagara has never said this. He never claimed this, but he also never corrected them either. That is an important thing to note, because this is where the inaction and indifference come in to backfire on Nagara. For the entirety of the show, he's never been the center of attention, but now that he is, he's causing more harm than good, not only to himself, but the people around him. And so the weight of everyone's hope has settled onto an ability he doesn't actually possess, and the baseball game with Ace has become a catalyst for which that hope will either be honored or destroyed. Nagara spends the rest of the day aimlessly practicing. Cap pitches to him, and the two of them work through his swing as the afternoon moves. And as they practice, Cap keeps talking. He tells them about the final game of the season in the Monkey League. Cap delivers the story in the same tone you might use to casually describe something you saw on the way to school, which is Sonny Boy in a nutshell. None of it is explained, and you either surrender to the logic of it or you don't. If you let yourself sit inside the strangeness without demanding that it justify itself, what you find is not nonsense. You find a precise and painful allegory about talent, identity, and institutional violence. Cap's story begins, as many sports stories always begin, with someone who was an underdog. Monkey Blue. A monkey with coloring that set him apart from the mass of his peers. In the world of the Monkey League, where every other player is nameless and interchangeable, Blue was visible. And he was persecuted for that visibility. Not for anything he did wrong, simply for being the thing that stood out in a field of sameness. For being a unique individual rather than a generic one. Blue was a rookie, new to the league, unknown, and unfortunately, a target. Blue had decided he was going to become a monolith in the sport, that he was going to make himself so undeniable and so permanently etched into the history of the Monkey League that the crowd would have no choice but to accept him on his own terms. And he got that opportunity in a game against Steroid Monkey. Steroid Monkey was the best player on the best team in the league, the standard in the name that carried the weight of the league behind it. A matchup between these two should not have been close. Instead, Blue threw a pitch so precise and so fast, it didn't just beat Steroid Monkey, it split his bat clean in half. The crowd went silent for a moment, and then it came back louder than it had ever been. Blue's pitch gave the monkeys something they had not had before. Hope. He was an instant legend. The crowd that had once looked past him now could not look away. And the thing that had made him a target was not taken into account anymore. His talent took over, and a myth was built around him. Blue had become the figure of every hope and anxiety the monkeys had ever accumulated. He had become a symbol, a vessel for everything the crowd needed to believe about itself. And then, Blue was on the verge of something historic. A perfect game. Every batter retired, no hits, no walks, no errors. The pinnacle of a pitcher completely in command of everything the sport could ever ask of them. The crowd was not just watching, they were inside it, they were invested in it, needing it to happen. Suddenly, the world shifted. A movement in whatever dimension the Monkey League was played in caught Blue's final pitch at exactly the wrong moment and carried it just outside the strike zone. The umpire, correctly, called it a ball. The crowd erupted. The players erupted. Blue, seeing the perfect game dissolving in front of him, walked toward the umpire and asked him directly, why? The game was practically over, Everyone in the stadium wanted to see a perfect game. Surely the umpire could see what this moment meant to everyone watching. The umpire looked at him and answered simply. The game they were playing had rules. The crowd's desire for a specific narrative was not his concern. The fairness of the game was all he served. That was the only thing he had ever sworn to uphold. Blue, in protest, threw his next 3 pitches in the exact same spot, as if to prove to the umpire and reassure the crowd that the first pitch had been a strike, and the umpire had simply failed to honor it. The umpire called all 3 of them balls. What happened next was not a riot in any ordinary sense. It was something worse than that. The fans and the players rushed the field together and they tore the umpire apart. He died on the field he had given his life to. He died because he had refused, at every opportunity, to let the crowd's hunger for a symbol overrule what was actually happening in the game. He died so that baseball would not. A profound but lonely dedication to something that the people who killed him had already stopped believing in long before they raised their hands against him. Cap finishes the story. The practice field is quiet, and the afternoon is still. Nagara stands at the plate with the bat in his hands, and Blue's story sits in the air. The next morning is the game with Ace. Mizuho steps up first, and she strikes out. Nozomi follows up. Everyone, even Nagara, holds faith that she out of everyone could be the one to get a hit. She strikes out too. Nagara is the last one, and everything this episode has been building towards, the monkey getter, the promise to take everyone home, the weight of his classmates' expectations, the story of Blue, is now resting on 3 pitches. Nagara, much like Naota, doesn't swing, and very quickly gets behind with an 0-2 count. He waits for the 3rd pitch. In a very brief, surreal moment, Nagara suddenly becomes able to see the monkeys. What he sees is a one-armed monkey, alone at the edge of the field, practicing his swing over and over again. Nagara knows, with a certainty the show doesn't bother explaining, that this is the umpire from Cap's story. The one who was killed for telling the truth. Still there, still practicing, still showing love for the game. Ace, frustrated by Nagara's apparent lack of effort, finally provokes him into swinging with everything he has. Unfortunately, it's not enough. Nagara strikes out. There will be no monkey getter, and Nagara has to transport everyone back home. After the game, the word spreads quickly. Nagara is taking everyone home tomorrow. The students spend the evening packing and preparing. The mood is hopeful, but the dramatic irony is still looming in the background. In the morning, everyone gathers on the beach. Nagara uses his power. He reaches for worlds without control or precision. One after another, they arrive at somewhere that is not home. Flat worlds, uninhabitable ones, worlds that have nothing in them. He keeps trying. However, the truth becomes undeniable. He cannot take them home. His power never worked that way. It was never in his control to choose the destination, only to move. And the place they needed to reach is not somewhere he can aim at. Somehow, he manages to get them back to the island. Most of his classmates say nothing. The silence has the particular quality of people who are disappointed by a situation they thought they had already figured out. Nozomi simply smiles and speaks. She says that this confirms what she suspected. Nagara can hop between worlds, but he cannot choose which world he goes to. Nozomi's ability to actually find home belongs to her. Only she can see it, the tiny speck of light in the sky that marks the way back. The episode ends where it began, essentially. On the island, drifting in the void, the students are no closer to home than they were before. That disappointment is immediately turned into confusion when one of their old teachers, Miss Aki, appears before them and changes everything. A different show probably would have stopped at the moment Blue split Steroid Monkey's bat. Another story would have recognized that the image of the scrappy rookie, the impossible pitch, and the crowd converting overnight from persecution to worship as the ending. The underdog triumphs and the institution is forced to reckon with who it had been wrong about, roll credits, cue the upbeat anime outro music. However, Sonny Boy doesn't stop there. Sonny Boy follows Blue all the way down. Because that is the more honest story. That is a story that understands what actually happens in adolescence when a system that was built to exclude you decides instead to consume you. The crowd did not stop caring about Blue's coloring because they grew as individuals, or because they examined their prejudice and found it wanting, or because their better nature prevailed. They stopped caring because they stopped seeing him as a monkey. They elevated him out of the category of a fellow creature entirely and placed him somewhere above it, a pitching demigod, an object of devotion, a fixed point around which the anxieties and hopes of an entire institution could be placed into. Blue didn't earn their acceptance. He earned their worship. And worship, as Sonny Boy understands it, is not the opposite of persecution. It is persecution wearing a different face. Outside of the lens of adolescence, this is what the show has been consistently critical of across every dimension it drifts through. Not institutions themselves, but the awful and entirely human tendency to apply institutional rules unevenly, to break them for the powerful and weaponize them against everyone else. To build a framework of fairness and then hollow it out from the inside until what remains is just the idea of control dressed up in the language of merit. The Monkey League had rules. It had an umpire. It had a box score and a record book and years of accumulated history. Every piece of the structure of fairness was present and accounted for. And every piece of it evaporated the moment the rules threatened the symbol the crowd created to survive. This is also why it might seem strange at first that Nozomi sides with the umpire. She is presented to us as a free spirit who goes against the grain of structure created by the students early on. Why would someone like her hold up a hardline rules enforcer like the umpire as the brave one? That's a good question. However, this is entirely consistent with something that Sonny Boy has been arguing for the entire show. The show does not dislike institutions. It dislikes the hierarchical way those institutions get applied, bent for the powerful, sharpened against the powerless. The umpire is not an instrument of oppression. He is the only person in the stadium for whom the rules are not a tool for someone's prominence. He believes in the rules the way you can only believe in something you are willing to die for. He died, so baseball would not. And in Sonny Boy's moral universe, that is not a rigid way of thinking. That is the purest possible expression of what an institution is supposed to be. Baseball, as Cap understands it, is play. Its rules are not designed to repress or oppress. They are designed to give the play a shape that makes sense, in which triumph and heartbreak are distributed with something approaching fairness. As long as those rules are applied evenly, they provide a framework that is bigger and more honest than any individual player, and any crowd's desperate need for a specific ending. You break those rules to get ahead, and you break baseball. You kill it. You take something that was designed to be fun and you convert it into another hierarchy. And why would anyone do that? Why would anyone want to kill something that's fun? You break those rules when it stops being fun. You do that when the game ceases to be the point and instead becomes a vehicle for something else, whether that be status, worth, or the validation that the world outside the game has withheld from you. Cap loved baseball and he knew he was not talented enough to make it his life. He accepted that. He resigned himself to the gap between his love for the game and his ability to play it. In doing so, he kept a relationship with baseball that the institution, or society in this case, could not touch, because he had never asked the institution to tell him who he was. Ace is a different story entirely. Ace defined himself through his baseball talent. Back home, being good at baseball made him special. He was being courted by pro scouts, and was on a trajectory that told him exactly what he was worth. Then, the drift happened. And in the strange island world, none of that exists. He is just a student among students. He is no longer exceptional in any framework that anyone around him recognizes. The thing that he had staked his identity on has been removed, and without it, he doesn't quite know what's left. This is why Ace gave the monkeys baseball. He introduced the game to them because he needed to be respected again on his own terms. He wanted to be the one who brought something extraordinary to the world, the one whose knowledge and talent justified his sense of himself. This is almost certainly why the Monkey League followed the same corrupted path that many institutions today follow, where the people inside it start using it to prove something about themselves, rather than to play. Bringing it back to the themes about growing up, in your adolescent years, you have something extraordinary in you, and sometimes the world around you is already deciding what that means. They are already building the stands, already printing the tickets, already preparing a mythology to drape over you like a costume you never agreed to wear. And if you don't develop a sense of self strong enough to resist that, then the crowd will build one for you. This is something else in Blue's story that speaks directly to the situation many of the students in the show face. Blue himself had begun to believe in the mythology the crowd presented him with. It had worked its way inside him too. When you are told often enough that you are above the ordinary rules, that your talent exempts you from the limitations that govern everyone else, some part of you starts to structure itself around that belief. Not out of arrogance necessarily, it's a gradual breakdown of the boundary between what you can do and who you are. Blue stopped being a pitcher who happened to be extraordinary and became, in his own mind, a being for whom the rules should be bent for. And that internal transformation is the most dangerous thing the crowd did to him. The mob that killed the umpire was the visible violence. The invisible violence was what happened inside Blue long before that. All of this is sitting in the air over the island when Nagara looks at his classmates and tries to understand what Blue's story has to do with him. And the answer is that it has everything to do with all of them. Let's start with Nozomi. She is magnetic in the way that Blue was magnetic before the crowd got to him. The kind of person who generates gravity. She draws others into orbit around her without effort or intention, and she becomes the focal point of a group's hope and direction simply by being who she is. She is the one who can see the way home due to her ability. She is, in ways that she has not fully examined, and that the show is not yet ready to make explicit, the person the group has been orienting itself around. Much like her ability, she is the fixed point. But Sonny Boy knows what happens to fixed points. It has just spent an episode telling you. And later in the show, when Nozomi loses her powers, the full weight of what she allowed to happen to her identity becomes visible. She breaks down, not because the powers themselves are gone, but because she had let her sense of what she was worth become inseparable from what she could do for the people around her. She had become, without realizing it, a vessel for everyone else's need. She had confused her usefulness with herself. This is exactly what the crowd did to Monkey Blue. They stopped seeing the creature and only saw the function. And Nozomi had, somewhere along the way, started to see herself in the same way. It is Nagara who has to be the one to tell her that she is the reason that he has become more assertive, more present, and more capable of showing up to his own life. Not because of anything she could do, it's because of who she is. She mattered before she was useful. The person is not the power, and the crowd cannot be allowed to determine where the line between those two things falls. Let's move on to Asakaze. It feels like Cap's story about Blue is simply a story about Akaze, but in a different font. He has the strongest power amongst the students: space manipulation. He can fold space into whatever he chooses and bridge that space to cross into other dimensions. He's the sole reason why the island the students are inhabiting hasn't sunk in on itself. He holds extraordinary talent and feels as though he should be praised for it. When Mizaki appears, the mysterious, authoritative figure of institutional legitimacy in a world with no legitimate institutions, does what the Monkey League did to Blue, but with full awareness of what she's doing. She finds the fracture point. When Nagara's inability to control his power becomes public, Mizaki uses it to discredit him and position Asakaze as the student's rightful savior. She doesn't just give Asakaze an identity. She gives him the student's version of one, fitted exactly to the shape of what the group needs him to be rather than who he actually is. And Asakaze proudly wears it. This is the moment that joins his story to Blue's in a way that is important and damning. Blue wanted to become a monolith in the sport. A myth akin to godhood was built around him, and he gladly accepted. Asakaze sees something similar forming around him and steps inside it willingly. The student's devotion, Misaki's endorsement, the student's need for a leader. He accepts all of it and calls it his identity. He becomes the crowd's pitcher. He is no longer throwing his own pitches. Nozomi sees this with the same clarity she brings to everything, and she can't respect it. When it's made very clear that Asakaze likes her, she tells him directly that she would never be with him romantically, not because of his power or his appearance or any surface quality, but because he has let his worth be entirely determined by the words of the group. She is saying what the umpire said to Blue essentially, but with the advantage of truly being heard. She's calling the pitch as she sees it. She's telling him that Misaki and the student's version of him is not him, and that choosing to become it anyway is not strength. Asakaze's story is interesting because it highlights that Blue's tragedy is not a tragedy, but a choice. The choice to decide that being consumed sounds better than the alternative. The choice to accept that this identity is not because the institution overwhelmed you, but it's because you looked at who you actually were and decided the crowd's version was an improvement. And this is where Sonny Boy's argument starts to take its full shape. Theoretically speaking, a person's worth, their liberty, their right to exist as themselves, rather than as a function of what they can provide to the people around them, should not be contingent on how well they play baseball, or how impressive their power is, or on how well they fit in the framework that the powerful have decided to call merit. Those rights should be uniform, ungoverned by the crowd's needs or the endorsements of authority figures or the Monkey League's record books. The umpire understood this. He was the only monkey in the stadium who did, and he died for it, on the field he loved, upholding the rules of the game that everyone else had already abandoned while still trying to call it baseball. The question that hangs over the rest of Sonny Boy is whether any of them will find a way to honor what the umpire understood, whether any of them will be willing to call the pitch as it actually is, regardless of what the crowd needs it to be, regardless of the cost. Whether any of them, when the moment comes, will step into the batter's box and swing the bat without a care of what the crowd thinks of them. And then there's Nagara.
Oh, give me a break. How can you throw yourself a pity party, then turn around and scoff at everybody else? Huh? Screw you!
Leave me alone.
Don't block out the truth and try to fool yourself. The moment that you run away, you become the same kind of idiot as the rest of them.
I said leave me alone.
This is why people think you're hopeless. So stupid.
I know that.
You're not some cat. Don't go running off without warning.
Nagara's relationship to Blue's story is not parallel like Asakaze's. However, they do share some similarities. Blue was persecuted, then elevated, then had his identity created and upheld by the crowd. Nagara's version happens faster. There is no persecution phase. There is no long climb from margin to center. One accidental world hop, and the students have already decided what he is. They do not ask him whether he can control it. They don't wait for confirmation. At that point in time, they need a symbol, the way the Monkey League needed Blue. To the students, Nagara is standing in the right place at the right moment, holding something that looks like the answer. So they build his identity immediately without his consent, and hand it to him and expect him to carry it. Nagara never tells them he can take them home. This is crucial. He doesn't lie, nor does he perform with confidence and make a promise he can't keep. He simply fails to correct them. And his silence, in the logic of a crowd that needs to believe something, functions as confirmation. Some people might hear what I had said earlier about this situation and view it as a moral failure on Nagara's part, but actually, I don't agree with that. I think this is something more recognizable and more painful than that. It is the behavior of a boy in late adolescence who has been so thoroughly convinced that his actual self is insufficient that he cannot bring himself to replace the student's version of him with a real one. Because the student's version of him at least has a purpose or a function that the group can use. His actual self feels like nothing worth offering. This is where Blue's story intersects with Nagara's in the way that hurts the most. Blue's perfect game was interrupted by a world that shifted beneath him. It was a failure that was not entirely his fault. It happened to him rather than through him. His quest to find his place within the Monkey League was absorbed by the crowd as a description of who he was. Nagara's failure on the beach is not entirely his fault either. He tries over and over until the trying itself becomes its own humiliation. He cannot do the one thing everyone gathered on the sand expecting him to do. The students, much like the monkeys, still build an identity for Nagara, but in the opposite direction to Blue. With the help of Miss Aki and the grudge that Asakaze still held for Nagara, the students now believe that Nagara is a traitor and useless to the group. The feeling that settles over him in that moment, the one that will push him deeper into this depressing indifference in the episodes that follow, is not just embarrassment. It is the conviction that many adolescents hold that they are not enough. Nagara believes the gap between who the students needed him to be and who he actually is represents some deficiency in himself, rather than a dishonesty in the self they built around him. This is the failure that adolescence specializes in producing. Not the failure of the attempt, striking out, missing the pitch, or throwing 4 balls when the crowd needed a strike, but the failure of self-perception that follows. The moment when a young person absorbs the crowd's disappointment and converts it back into a verdict about their own worth. Nagara did not fail the students. The students failed to ask him the right questions. But Nagara has twisted that distinction, already internalizing the verdict and retreating further behind the indifference that has always been his shelter. What pulls him out of it is not a moment of sudden clarity or a dramatic confrontation with his own potential. It's people who refuse to let him stay silent inside the retreat. Mizuho tells him exactly what his passivity was costing him. It's abrasive in the only way she knows how to speak. However blunt and slightly merciless it is the honesty of someone who has decided that the kindest thing she can do is tell him the truth. She calls him spineless, a coward, She survives saying them because Nagara, unlike the crowd in the Monkey League, is capable of hearing the truth if it's delivered by someone he trusts. Nozomi, who Nagara may have romantic feelings for, does not fix him either. She shows him that engagement is survivable, that showing up to your own life fully and without the protection of indifference does not necessarily destroy you. She is the reason he has become more capable of stepping up to the plate as himself, rather than as the thing everyone needs him to be. Not because of anything she does for him, it's because of who she is in proximity to him. It's important also to mention Rajdani, whose pragmatic and unsentimental analysis of their situation in the void eventually leads to the discovery that reframes everything. It is not Nagara's failure that defines what his power actually is. It is the patient, methodical work of understanding it without the distortion of everyone's expectations layered over it. Nagara cannot transport people to specific worlds. Rajdani discovers that he can create them, actually. He can build worlds. The power that failed so publicly on the beach turned out to be something stranger and more extraordinary than transportation. It was creation. It just needed to be seen clearly by people looking at it honestly before it could be understood. This is the answer to Blue's tragedy that Blue never got to receive. Blue's talent was defined by the crowd before he could truly define it himself. Nagara's power is eventually understood on its own terms by people who cared enough to look at what it actually was, rather than what they needed it to be. The difference between those two outcomes is not talent, nor is it power. It is the presence of people who will tell you the truth about yourself before the crowd gets the chance to replace it with something more useful to them. Understanding his power is not the same as using it. Knowing what you are capable of is not the same as being willing to act on it. And Nagara, who has spent most of the series retreating, qualifying, and watching from the sidelines, still has to find the moment where he steps onto the field as himself and swings. That moment does not come in the baseball episode. It comes way later, when everything else has already fallen apart. Later in the show, when Asakaze unilaterally makes the decision, with the full weight of Misaki's endorsement and the students' devotion behind him, that all of the students will remain in the drifting dimensions, he does something that goes beyond ambition or self-interest. He removes the choice from everyone. He appoints himself as the one who gets to decide the shape of everyone else's lives, because the institution has told him that he is the exceptional one, and that he has accepted the institution's verdict without asking what it costs him to do so. He has become, completely involuntarily, what the crowd built him to be. He is playing the crowd's game, on the crowd's terms, and by the crowd's rules. Which is to say, he is no longer playing baseball at all. He has killed it. He has taken something that was supposed to provide a structure in which everyone plays fairly and converted it into a hierarchy in which the most powerful individual gets to determine the ending. Nagara and Mizuo are left on the island. Nozomi's disappearance has made things difficult. But they have a chance to go back home. They now have a chance to step up to the plate. And they swing.
You must not leave this place.
But you didn't say we can't leave here. I know we'll be okay. Let's go.
They swing the way Naota swings at the satellite, imperfectly, with whatever strength is available, against odds that have not been arranged in their favor. They defy the principal, who I had interpreted as the god of these worlds, but I couldn't find any confirmation on it. They defy Misaki. They defy the now comfortable nihilism that has settled over the rest of the students, the collective thought process that the most powerful individual has already decided for them. They push through it, and they succeed in finding their way back to the real world. Not because they were the most talented, not because the institution recognized their worth, or the crowd built an identity around their effort. It was because they refused to let someone else decide what game they were playing. Nagara, who had believed that the gap between who the students needed him to be and who he actually was represented a failure of self, finally understood what he saw when the umpire appeared in front of him. That the framework only means something if it applies to everyone. Your worth is not contingent on how well you perform within whatever arbitrary structure the powerful have decided to call fair this week. The most important swing you will ever take is the one you take as yourself, for reasons that belong entirely to you, in a direction that no crowd commissioned. Blue became a tragic figure because no one was left to tell him that the figure created by the monkeys was not him. Nagara becomes himself because the people around him refused to let him disappear into either the student's version or his own retreat. And in the end, Sonny Boy leaves him and Mizuo in the ordinary real world, with a message that closes the loop on everything the show opened. Our lives are only beginning when we enter adolescence. What lies ahead might just take a little while longer than we expect it to. When you hold both images in your mind at once, Naota swinging into a sense of identity, Nagara swinging into an ordinary life of his own choosing, you begin to see the full shape of what these two shows have been trying to build together. You begin to see the whole game of baseball. Now, we need to look at both these shows at once and ask what they're actually saying together. Let's start with the structure. Both of these baseball episodes are the fourth episode in their respective series. In both cases, the baseball story arrives at the point of transformation, the moment when the characters are no longer who they were at the beginning and not yet who they will become by the end. The old self is loosening its grip, and the new one hasn't arrived yet. Both shows choose that precise moment to drop their characters onto a baseball diamond and ask them what they're made of. Then, there's the baseball itself, because neither of these shows gives you a normal baseball game. Fooly Cooley gives you a normal one, but then a satellite falls from the sky at the speed of a pitch. Sonny Boy gives you an invisible monkey throwing a perfect game that will be remembered and mourned for centuries. Both shows take the formal structure of baseball and they surround it with the impossible, the surreal, and the cosmically strange. The effect of that is the same. It signals to you that what is happening on this field is not really about baseball. The rules of the game stand in for the rules of the world these characters are being asked to enter. The diamond, with all its clarity and its right angles, is the most logical space in an illogical universe. It is precisely there that the most important and disorderly things happen. The question that both of these episodes are asking that sits underneath the surrealism, the metaphor, and the visual language is not simply, will you swing? We've established that it's bigger than that. It's actually, what does it mean to act? What does it mean to choose yourself? To commit to being a particular person in a world that has strong opinions about what you should be? This is where Fooly Cooley and Sonny Boy diverge just a bit. However, they are not arguing with each other. One of them is asking the first half of a question, and the other is asking the second. Fooly Cooley believes that agency is the beginning of everything. Naota doesn't just stop a satellite. He steps out of his brother's outline. He stops living inside a hand-me-down identity and starts to occupy his own. And Fooly Cooley highlights just how imperfect that process is. Naota doesn't arrive at the moment he needs to swing having resolved everything. He swings with a bat of someone else's creation. He calls on borrowed strength. And in the end, all he could do was hold the satellite back. Haruko helps send the satellite back into space. None of that disqualifies the moment, though. The swing is still real. The self that emerges from it is still his. Fooly Cooley's argument is also this. You do not have to be ready. You do not have to be whole. You just have to swing. The wholeness comes after, and it comes because you swung. Sonny Boy is standing just a little bit further down the road of adolescence. The show has already watched someone theoretically swing. It watched Blue throw pitch after extraordinary pitch until the crowd had consumed him so completely that the rules of the game no longer applied to him, and the only person who tried to enforce them paid for it with his life. Sonny Boy does not dispute Fooly Cooley's argument. It doesn't tell you not to act, not to engage, or not to allow yourself to be real and present in the game. What it does tell you is that agency alone isn't enough. That individual self-determination, without a clear and grounded sense of who you are and what you value, will be absorbed by the first system that finds it useful. This is the maturation that happens between these two shows. Fooly Cooley is the lesson of early adolescence. Act, engage, stop hiding behind the performance of not caring. The world is happening and you need to be in it. Sonny Boy is the lesson of what comes after. Yes, act, engage, but know what you are engaging with. Understand the systems that your own action enters. Develop a self specific enough, grounded, or particular enough that the crowd cannot simply override it with the self they need you to be. There is also the question of the audience, the question of what it means to become yourself in front of other people, because you can't do it alone, and yet the presence of others is exactly what makes it so dangerous. Naota's swing is private in its essence. It's something that occurs inside him and manifests outward. The crowd watches, but they do not determine the outcome. Which brings us back to Nagara again, because Nagara is the answer to the question of the audience when compared to Blue's story. Blue's tragedy is that he kept going, throwing pitch after pitch without ever taking a step back to ask whether the crowd cheering his name truly had any interest in him at all, or only in what he could do for them. Nagara gets that space, not because the crowd is any kinder to him than it was to Blue. nor because the institution is any more honest either. Miss Aki is as calculating and self-serving as any authority figure Sonny Boy has ever produced. He gets that space because he has people around him who refuse to let the group define him before he has figured out who he actually is. Mizuo, who called him out for his spinelessness when it was easier to stay quiet. Nozomi, who showed him that engagement with life was survivable and worth attempting. Even Rajdani, who helped him understand what his power actually was. These people are the difference between Blue's ending and Nagara's. They are the reason the story goes a little bit differently. And when Nagara's moment finally comes at the end of the story, Nagara does what Naota did at the top of the medical mechanical building. He swings. Not with the kind of talent that generates myths and fills stadiums. He swings the way you swing when you are tired and uncertain. He swings the way you do when the odds have not been arranged in your favor, and the only thing you are sure of is that the alternative, letting someone else decide your ending, is the one outcome you can't accept. He and Mizuo make a dangerous effort to find their way back into the real world, and they succeed. And then they return to ordinary life. No powers, no new worlds, just regular days spent at school and a part-time job. A world where no one remembers what happened in the drift. Where Nozomi doesn't remember what she meant to Nagara. The extraordinary has been exchanged for the mundane, in an act of bravery that no one witnessed or will commemorate. It sounds bleak, but this is not defeat. This is the full expression of the same act that Naota performs when he swings the bat. It's just arriving at the truth from the opposite direction. Naota's swing is the claim of a self that has been waiting to be chosen. Nagara's return is the protection of a self that has been hard won. The refusal to let his classmates' version of him, or even the extraordinary dimensions version of him, replace the ordinary and specific person he actually is. Fooly Cooly and Sonny Boy also combine a central message that says you cannot become yourself in total isolation. You need the pitch, the field, the game, the people in the stands, the teammates in the dugout, and the umpire behind the plate. You need the friction of other people's expectations, honesty, and refusal to let you disappear into either the society's conformity or your own retreat. You cannot become yourself in total isolation, but you also cannot become yourself if society or the group you're around gets to define what yourself means. The game has to be played. The swing has to happen. But the swing has to be yours. As long as you are the one swinging for yourself and not the idea of yourself that other people have created, the swing counts. It always counts. We have to talk about failure one more time too, because baseball never stops being about failure, and neither do these shows. The failure that actually matters is the failure to swing. Striking out is survivable. Getting out is survivable. Standing at the plate and watching the pitch go by because you were too afraid to commit is the failure that these shows cannot forgive, because that's the failure that leaves you unchanged. From a main character perspective, Naota and Nagara face a similar type of failure. They initially refuse to swing the bat at all, opting to let the game pass them by. Nagara does make an attempt to swing earlier than Naota does, although I'd argue it was more out of obligation than him actually wanting to swing the bat. However, it was their second time around. When another pitch presented itself, they decided to swing the bat. Naota in a more literal sense than Nagara, but both of them made the decision to actually do something without the fear of failure. These two shows, taken together, map out the full arc of what it means to grow up. Not the sanitized version, nor the version where the becoming is triumphant and clean and resolved, but the real version. The version where you are always in the middle of things, always negotiating between who you are and what the world is asking you to be. There will be a final ending in this game of life, but no one knows when it is. There's going to be a moment when the score is settled, the field is cleared, and you can go home knowing it's done. Even though that final ending is uncertain, you must keep playing. You have to keep deciding, over and over again, who you are going to be when the pitch comes in fast and the crowd is screaming and the umpire is the only one in the stadium telling you the truth. The game is only just beginning when we enter adolescence, and honestly, even as fully formed adults in our 20s and 30s, the game is still in its early stages. The innings keep coming and the pitches keep arriving. What lies ahead might just take a little while longer than we expect. And that isn't failure. That is the game itself, playing out the way it was always supposed to, asking you at every at-bat the same question it has always asked. Are you going to swing? That is what Fooly Cooly and Sonny Boy are about. That is what baseball is about, when you look at it long enough to see what it's actually been trying to tell you all along. That is what growing up is about. This endless process of becoming someone real in a world that is always asking you to be something else instead. The box score may remember everything, but the person at the plate only has one pitch at a time. That moment and the next. And in that moment, You have one chance to decide who is doing the swinging, yourself or the crowd that has been watching, waiting to create their own version of your story. So swing, but swing as yourself. The game is not over just because you failed once. You just need to step up to the plate again, because nothing will happen unless you swing the bat.
Look, you'll be okay. If you're like what you were back there, you're gonna be just fine, I promise. So don't worry.
You've been listening to YGN Yugen Radio, broadcasting from inside the feeling you have, but can't name. Make sure you grip the bat tight and give life your best swing. Tune in next time when we talk about why I love the rain. Safe travels.